Is wood milk real? Absolutely not. Only real milk is real. Got wood?
You've probably noticed that plant-based milk alternatives like soy, coconut, and almond milks are increasingly being made available to consumers by the biggest mainstream brands, from Starbucks to burger joints to your local grocery store. This development probably seems pretty innocent to you, but to the dairy industry, it's increasingly a crisis. And this massive, politically connected industry is employing some tactics to quell the rise of the alternatives, sales of which are projected to rise by almost 10% a year through 2027, that might surprise you. While cow's milk consumption has been on the decline across America for decades, with milk consumption down 42% from half a decade ago, the industry is especially concerned about the decline among young people, so-called Generation Z. They purchase 20% less cow's milk than the national average. The industry has gotten wise to some of the systemic factors contributing to this decline and the beliefs, concerns, and values that increasingly dictate the buying decisions of those in their teens and early 20s. And they're firing all cannons, throwing everything at the wall, so to speak, to stop this. But is it working? And what are the potential negative consequences of this aggressive approach to taking down their competitors? Let's take a look at the recent campaign funded by Big Dairy that backfired pretty spectacularly. Aubrey Plaza's satirical endorsement of an imaginary product called wood milk. On its face, this marketing campaign has it all. Plaza is the rare celebrity who appeals almost universally, rising to prominence for her role in a comedy show called Parks and Rec, where she portrayed April Ludgate, a smart, sarcastic, anti-establishment intern who's always a step ahead of the bumbling middle-aged bureaucrats around her. She's developed a personal brand that's not so dissimilar from her character, witty, self-assured, and seemingly unaffected by the pressure to conform to the expectations of others. The Wood Milk campaign video, honestly, is pretty funny as far as these things go. It takes full advantage of Plaza's signature deadpan delivery, quirkiness, charisma, and if you haven't already noticed, bombshell looks. But the reaction to this campaign was swift and decisively poor, so much so that it seems to be making the news everywhere. Maybe because Plaza was so beloved and so perceived as the last celebrity that would ever sell out, people felt betrayed by her gig hawking cow's milk in a way they wouldn't have if it had been somebody other than the thinking person's dream girl. One would assume Plaza was taken aback by the scale and vehemence of the response, but she hasn't commented on the fallout. What we do know is that she ended up disabling comments on her sponsored Instagram post. So maybe she's feeling a little bit regretful, or maybe she's just having fun cashing the fat check that she undoubtedly received for this project. The fake social media accounts for the Wood Milk brand, which Plaza's bosses were obviously making a hard play on that front, considering they even tried to get their own viral hashtag going, #WoodMilkNation, cringe, in many cases have ended up doing the same thing and disabling their comments. So what does this say about Gen Z when it comes to the use by industries like Big Dairy of paid influencers in marketing campaigns and social media, and internet culture more generally? Let's take a look at what matters to the emerging generation of consumers, how they take in and access information, and how they make decisions and formulate beliefs. The Wood Milk campaign showcased one of the two main arguments the dairy industry has when it comes to winning Americans, particularly young Americans, back. Both of these arguments are seemingly wholesome and sincere on the surface, but like the dairy industry in general, they're selling Americans a warm and fuzzy set of illusions. First talking point for Big Dairy: cow's milk is more natural than plant-based alternatives. It's old-fashioned in the best way. It's less processed, which consumers have come to vaguely associate with a food being better for you. Alternative milks are portrayed as a Frankenstein-style perversion of something that was working fine before and has been working for hundreds, even thousands of years, as if cow's milk is the innocent victim of a sinister deep state plot to corrupt everything that's good about America. Writer Sherry Ning said that the milk industry was riding a wave of neo-traditionalism among some members of Gen Z who are embracing a more down-to-earth ethos centered on nature and regenerative farming. The return of cow's milk is kind of a cultural zeitgeist, saying, screw tech, this is going too fast and science is going too far. Just go back to normal and stop engineering the way we live. But the vast majority of milk comes from concentrated animal feeding operations, which are these giant factory farms where cows are fed corn and grain and are very likely treated with hormones and antibiotics. Now, the absurdity of this was demonstrated, ironically, by Wisconsin Senator Tammy Baldwin. Baldwin has been one of the biggest advocates for Big Dairy, as well as for overreaching, unconstitutional pieces of legislation like the Dairy Pride Act. Tammy tweeted, I took a stand for Wisconsin dairy farmers by calling out the US FDA's guidance allowing plant-based products to be labeled as milk. If you're wondering, the definition of milk hasn't changed, and here she posts the dictionary definition of milk. And she clearly didn't realize how much she was owning herself. Milk, noun. An opaque white fluid, okay, that's fair enough. Rich in fat and protein, depends on your milk. Secreted, ew, by female mammals for the nourishment of their young. Now think of how differently this tweet would have come across if someone had just underlined the word there. Now back to Aubrey Plaza. The Wood Milk campaign has also spawned some hilarious fan parody videos.
Hi, I'm Aubrey Plaza, and I've been paid to, I'm here to remind you that wood milk is not real milk. Hey, could I get an iced almond milk latte?
And one in particular draws attention to something that really comes out in this tweet from Tammy Baldwin. One of the lines in Aubrey Plaza's Got Wood Milk video includes a reference to the idea that wood milk is made and not born.
Now let's take a look at how wood milk is born. Not born, exactly.
So what makes real milk real? I'm glad you asked. Was your milk stolen from a baby? Then it's probably real milk. Or it might be this milk, which I just stole from a baby 2 minutes ago.
The second talking point the dairy industry is really leaning on right now is about the so-called nutritional value of milk. However, another example of the industry's use of influencers, where things probably didn't go quite as planned, involves Yvonne Zapata, a 24-year-old marathoner living in Brooklyn. She was hired as an ambassador for an industry rebranding itself as trendy and sporty. However, despite her paid contract with Big Dairy, she's actually quoted in the New York Times as saying she doesn't really like dairy milk. Ouch. Now that brings me to the bad news for Big Dairy. Gen Z is increasingly concerned about their health, and despite the talking points about nutrition and naturalness and nature and fairies and waving fields of grain that I just mentioned, the health downsides of dairy are becoming better and better known. Gen Z is also increasingly aware of the imminent danger posed by animal agriculture, including dairy, to the climate. And while they're easier to reach in a targeted way than ever before, thanks to the plethora of personal data collected about them on the internet by services they use more than any other group like Instagram, this generation is more influenced by their peers than traditional advertisers, and more skeptical of brands and companies' force-fed narratives. Social media has normalized the consumption of plant-based milk through two things. One is by normalizing plant-based diets, even when people live in a community where they're uncommon. The second thing social media has done is make information about dairy and animal agriculture in general more accessible. The value that Gen Z places on authenticity and honesty makes them less likely to buy into flimsy arguments just based on who's delivering them. And the fact that they're being fed so much information that they don't know what to trust has actually made them better assessors of the quality of information, by and large, than older people. Now, if you have one of those crazy aunts or uncles who frequents Facebook and posts about QAnon, you probably know that while Generation Z has plenty of flaws, they tend to be a little bit more skeptical about the sources of the information they're consuming and what the motives of the people making those arguments might be. So it's going to be hard for Big Dairy to stay a step ahead of them, and I think the failure of Aubrey Plaza's Wood Milk campaign really demonstrates that even when you employ some of the best and most well-known tactics to reach Generation Z, sometimes they're just too slick for you.
Stop the cap. Stop the cap.